Hello, I'm John Bloomfield. I'm an honorary research fellow at the University of Birmingham. And more than a decade ago, I helped set up the European Union's Climate Knowledge Innovation Community Programme and have been working on that and on environmental issues for the last decade.
Hi, and I'm Fred Stewart. I'm a visiting professor in innovation and sustainability in London in the UK. I've been involved with TIPSI over a number of years in trying to develop new approaches to transformative innovation.
So in the first of these three demonstration episodes that we're recording for the TIPSI conference, we're going to explore the significance of the European Green Deal. So over to you, Fred.
Okay, well, we launched this blog series back at the beginning of the year because I think we both felt that the European Green Deal was opening up new opportunities for transformative innovation. So I think we'll have a chat between John and me now to just reprise some of the arguments and approaches that have struck us as novel and important with the emergence of this new policy framework. So, John, let's just start off by you summarising why we felt that the European Green Deal was novel and important with regard to policy for sustainability and climate change.
Well, I think there are three key reasons, really. Firstly, and most obviously, it takes climate change seriously. It puts the issue of the transformation to a low carbon society at the centre of a major policy initiative across the whole of Europe. Secondly, it does so with a coherent policy framework. The document on which it's based launched in December 2019, and on which the European Council then made its decision to invest this 750 billion euro programme, was a serious attempt to delineate the key areas where action is needed, the key areas where systems need to be transformed in energy, buildings, mobility, agriculture and food industry, in a way that hadn't been done before. And thirdly, it gave the European Union an economic capacity. For the first time, it has the right to borrow in the way that previously had just been reserved to national treasuries, national governments. And that opens up a whole new range of opportunities for Europe to put serious money on the table to aid this transition. So those would be the starting point.
Okay, so it's sort of foregrounding sustainability and climate change in a new way, expressing system transformation as a framework for policy for the first time, and thirdly, getting Europe itself engaged in fiscal and other policies to support such an approach. The truth is, as we know, that the European Union is made up of a whole bundle of member states with their own inclinations and prejudices and approaches. And so European policy at the end of the day has in some way to be able to express the views of the different member states. So I suppose it might be worth just taking stock of what we feel's happened on the national policy level since the launch of the European Green Deal, and whether this is supportive or undermining of the European Green Deal sort of project. I mean, two obvious examples are the German new government with its new coalition as to what its significance is, and the UK, for example, has a quite different perspective in terms of a more traditional industrial policy focus. So what have you got to say about that?
Well, the UK is an outlier, although I think it's important to acknowledge that the Johnson government, whatever its many shortcomings, is very different from the US Republican Party. So there are powerful denialist and skeptic voices within the UK political scene, particularly within the press and within parts of the Conservative Party. But for the moment, the Johnson government is committed to the climate change agenda, but in a very traditionalist way, as you said, with a focus on a limited range of areas of technical change, with a lot of hoped for technological innovation, as in carbon capture and storage or nuclear, where the results are uncertain or doubtful, and where in areas where you can make immediate transformation, such as in solar, which is unmentioned in their 10-point plan, and on energy efficiency in homes, where the poultry scheme that the Rishi Sunak Chancellor put forward, the Green Homes Grant, has now been immediately abandoned. So the picture, while as I said, is very different and better than in the United States under Trump, or with their counterparts of the Republican Party, nevertheless, it's still very limited. Now, there's a real contrast there with some of the efforts that are being made, not just by the new German government, but by the Spanish and Italian governments for significant transformation. But the German government program agreed in this three-party coalition in December is a real game changer, because it brings together the right-wing pro-business Liberal Party with Social Democracy and the Greens in a three-way coalition, and a serious transformation in the climate agenda runs through that their program, and it's backed by support from the German Association of Industry, the German equivalent of the British Confederation of Industry, and there's a strong focus in the new government program on a wholesale across the board transformation between now and 2030. So it's got targets all the way through for carbon neutrality in 2045, but it's got a focus on the immediate, what needs to be done in this decade, and also a commitment to the resources to make it happen in all the key areas. And indeed, the head of the German Confederation of Industry is also willing for and arguing for the investments to be made, not just by the private sector and the public sector within Germany, but for there to be European monies used for the same purpose. So that is a real policy shift from the previous attitude of the German government, and is a sign that they are taking the issue seriously. And of course, that means that as the biggest economy and the most powerful government within the European Union, that will help to transform the political scene on the climate agenda across Europe and pull some of the laggards and doubters, such as in the Polish government, potentially with them.
Now, I mean, there's a bit of tension following the building back after the pandemic between those who see the need for a one-off policy intervention to initiate that recovery, and those who see it as just the first step of a new longer-term turn towards a more interventionist type of policy. Which one do you think is going to prevail over the next 12 months or so?
Well, this seems to me to be the crucial policy question, which TIPSI participants should have a real interest in. And I'm aware that within the academic community and the policy practitioners, and we dealt with some of them in one of our blogs, there's a doubt or a skepticism about the ability of the European Union and its Green Deal to add up to anything much, which we think is a real misconception. But there's a political debate going on here now, and the balance of forces have shifted towards those looking for some permanent change. So the Greek right-wing Prime Minister Mitsotakis and the Spanish socialist Pedro Sanchez have both argued for this being made permanent, the Green Deal policy instruments. Draghi, the Italian Prime Minister, ditto with Macron. And as I indicated, the head of the German Confederation of Industry has been arguing similarly. So there's a real opportunity now to transform the European Green Deal as a one-off fund into a permanent climate fund. And there's some complicated discussions going on about the Stability and Growth Pact, the criteria for borrowing, etc. But there's now the real political opening, which all progressives and all those seriously committed to the climate agenda should be arguing for, which is that Europe needs the investment capacity and the instruments to ensure that it's got a permanent fund able to make green investment decisions in the long term. Now, obviously, if you then get that sort of fund, just as with the European Green Deal, you've got the question of how to allocate it, how to ensure it's not just reserved for the big boys, the current industrial incumbents, how, as we've heard in the discussion on the energy transition in Valencia, in one of the other recordings we got in this series, what's needed is for those resources to be discussed and determined locally and regionally, bringing a whole range of stakeholders together. So the wider story that TIPSI and the associated elements around it on how to make transition are arguing for. But the crucial policy point is to ensure that there is a permanent fund there that is available for green investment that can be allocated. And so we're not scrabbling around as we've done in the previous decade for bits and pieces of resources from different funds to try to bend them towards the climate agenda. We need a permanent, powerful, strong investment fund, green investment fund available. And I think there are real opportunities for doing so. And there should be a clamour for that from policymakers in the next, over the coming period. And it could be something which the EU could take to the COP27 in Egypt at the end of this year to say, look, this is how we're seriously showing ongoing commitment with this agenda.
Good. So
there I've touched on some of the broader political issues, but what, to those who are at the TIPSI conference, to the academics and policymakers involved, what makes the European Green Deal of particular interest to them, particularly in relation to its innovation policy aspects?
Well, I think it resonates with those three issues you've identified as characterizing European Green Deal. From an innovation perspective, it very much illustrates the key features of what those of us in this community regard as transformative innovation and the policies necessary for it. And those are three clear issues. The first is the innovation policy has to address what we call directionality. That is, we're not just interested in innovation or innovativeness for its own sake, that we want policies to promote innovation which pursue a particular direction of addressing climate change and improving environmental sustainability. So directionality is the first key pillar. The second is the recognition that the pursuit of sustainability requires system transformation. Well, the innovation community has a repertoire of concepts such as socio-technical systems to be able to understand what specific systems are, rather than we've got to change the whole system overall, which is a rather abstract aspiration, but instead identifies specific socio-technical systems where innovation is needed to really transform them from their current unsustainable paths to a new sustainable one. And then the third, clearly, the end of a period of fetishization of really the state keeping out of innovation and leaving it to the market and the business world to make its decisions. The rebirth of a clearer public policy clearly suggests that there's a new opportunity for framing innovation policy using a much wider range and positive, constructive forms of intervention by public policies. So it seems to me, in terms of what the TIPSI community is interested in, is foregrounded really by this new European Green Deal framework.
Now, you made a powerful case there for how positive this is and the opportunities to engage with it. But there'll still be skeptics who are worried that the traditional industrial players who are increasingly recognizing that this climate change agenda is here to stay are going to see this as an opportunity for them to get a slice of the action. And the danger is that they'll dominate this program. How should those of us who are engaged in this from a systems perspective respond to that danger?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a fundamental question, really, and it is a contradictory and ambiguous one. In the language used by the TIPSI community, we're talking about the big, powerful incumbent players who naturally have the resources, expertise, and political influence to respond most immediately. I think the involvement of the incumbents is not in itself necessarily a completely negative picture. Clearly, there are problems with the fossil fuel industry and its influence, which clearly needs to be seriously circumscribed. But many of the other players in domains such as building construction, transport, and so on, clearly, if we're going to move in a sustainable direction, they have some sort of role to play. I think the key is when you raise the concern about their dominance, because if the whole new innovation agenda for the European Green Deal is dominated by those players, then I think it simply won't address the challenge and opportunity of system transformation. So in that sense, it's extremely important that there are new types of initiative which involve a much broader range of social actors, small businesses, local governments, and which do promote innovation in a more diffuse, less technology-focused way. And certainly the initiatives around the renovation program for domestic dwellings, around new types of integrated mobility system, clearly represents a different systemic direction. Now,
so you want 1,000 flowers to bloom?
Yeah, and they're present. So it's not, I think the skeptics are wrong to feel that this is not present in the European Green Deal agenda. They are present, but they are in a sense in competition with some of the narrower traditional industrial players. And so it needs to be nurtured to ensure greater variety than simply a reversion to that old model.
So this would suggest that it's important for those attending this conference and when they discuss it with their colleagues back home, that they find ways to contribute to the development and implementation of these European Green Deal programs and the next generation EU programs in their own countries and their local regions.
Absolutely. I mean, it seems to me the real challenge and opportunity for the TIPSI community is to ensure that the new type of broader system transformation model of innovation with a much wider range of players, a notion of socio-technical change, emphasis on experimentation and diversity, that is promoted and given a substantial space within the policy and economic arenas. And I think that does depend on members of this community explaining the significance of this new direction of innovation policy, but participating in enabling these new type of transformative policy initiatives to become established and be promoted. You know, there are plenty of innovation experts around with knowledge about how businesses can manage their innovation, with knowledge about investment in national R&D programs. But this needs to be complemented by innovation experts who understand that transformative innovation requires building new systems involving this new rich mix and diversity of players, and where the outcome is not a specific product or process which can be appropriated by the individual business, but the output is a change in the system that is established within societies in individual countries and across Europe. So to me, it's a great opportunity, and I think in many ways it does depend on the TIPSI members actually joining in and making it happen.
Fred, thank you for that. I think to paraphrase an old saying, the point is not just to understand the world, but to change it. Thanks on that. And I think that gives some shape to what we're trying to do in our Making the Green Deal Happen blog series. So I hope that's been of interest to the colleagues at the conference. And we've got 2 further blogs, one on the role of regulation and one on energy transition in the Spanish province of Valencia, that follow on from this and that will be of interest to participants. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks, bye.